All right, if you're in the food safety or hospitality world, you know the game is always changing, right? For decades, we've been laser focused on preventing accidents, things like cross-contamination or spoilage, the stuff that goes wrong by mistake. But what happens when the threat isn't an accident at all? Today, we're going to dive into a really important new standard that completely shifts our focus from defending against mistakes to defending against deliberate attacks.
So, let me just ask you this straight up. Is your current food safety plan actually ready for an intentional attack? It's a tough question, isn't it? Because our plans are usually fantastic at handling accidental hazards, but they can have some serious blind spots when it comes to the very modern risks of deliberate sabotage, tampering, or even economically motivated fraud.
So, here's our game plan for this explainer. We're going to map out this whole new landscape. First, we'll talk about this new era of threats. Then we'll dig into the unified standard built to deal with them. We'll also clearly separate food defense from food fraud, because they are not the same thing. And finally, we'll look at what these mitigation measures actually look like on the ground.
Okay, let's get right into it. To really get why this new standard even exists, we first have to understand just how much the risks to our food supply have evolved. You know, for the longest time, food safety was all about fighting those invisible enemies, the bacteria, the allergens, the contaminants that accidentally get into our products. And let me be clear, that work is still absolutely crucial. But this new standard forces us to face a totally different kind of threat: deliberate acts. We're talking about real sabotage, ideologically motivated tampering, and even counterfeiting just for profit.
So what's our new tool to face down these threats? Well, let's take a look at the standard itself. It's called ISO 22202-100.
At its heart, ISO 22200 is a new global standard that lays out what we call prerequisite programs, or PRPs. The easiest way to think about PRPs is as the bedrock, the fundamental layer of good hygiene and manufacturing practices that create a baseline for safety across the entire food chain.
So you might be asking, why a whole new standard now? Well, it's actually about simplification. Before this, we had 6 different standards for different sectors. So, if your company was involved in, say, both food manufacturing and packaging, you were juggling multiple documents. This new standard takes the common requirements from all 6 and puts them in one place. It streamlines everything, creates one unified baseline for the entire supply chain, and it's built to work perfectly with the big picture ISO 22000 food safety management system.
Okay, now let's break down the first of 2 huge concepts in this standard that go way beyond those traditional PRPs. Let's talk about food defense. Food defense is all about protecting our products from intentional acts of sabotage or terrorism. The key word here, and it's everything, is intent. We're not talking about accidents anymore. We're talking about malicious, often ideologically driven attacks that are designed to cause widespread public harm. So how do you actually build this defense? The standard lays out a really clear 4-step process. You start by assessing your threats, really identifying where you're most vulnerable to a malicious attack. From there, you have to document all your mitigation measures in a formal plan. Then you implement it, making sure your team gets effective training. And finally, you have to constantly review and verify that it's working. It's not a one-and-done thing. It's a continuous cycle of protection.
All right, let's switch gears to the second key concept. It's different from food defense, but just as important: preventing food fraud.
So, while food defense is about protecting against harm, food fraud is about protecting against deception for economic gain. Think about a supplier substituting a cheap, low-grade oil but still charging you for premium olive oil. Or maybe they're mislabeling the country of origin to get a higher price. See, the motivation here isn't to hurt people, it's purely about money.
And just like with food defense, there's a required 4-step process. But, and this is super important, notice the subtle but critical difference in step 1. For food defense, we assess threats. For food fraud, we assess vulnerabilities. We're asking a different question. Where in our supply chain are we most susceptible to being cheated? From that point on, the process is similar. You document your plan, you implement it, and you're regularly reviewing it to make sure it's effective.
Okay, so that's the what and the why. But what does this stuff actually look like in the real world? Let's get into the how. The specific, practical measures you can actually take to protect your operation.
The good news is the standard doesn't just tell you what to do and leave you hanging. It actually gives you a whole toolbox. Annex A is packed with practical examples for food defense, and Annex B does the exact same thing for food fraud. Seriously, these are amazing starting points for building out your own plans.
And this is where you can really see how the 2 strategies are different.
Food defense, on the left, is mostly about securing your physical space. We're talking fences, locks, CCTV, access control. You're basically building walls to keep bad actors out. Food fraud mitigation, over on the right, is all about securing the integrity of your supply chain. This means doing supplier audits, analytical testing, and having rock-solid traceability. It's less about building walls and more about building trust, and then verifying that trust.
So when you boil it all down, ISO 22210 really represents a fundamental mindset shift. It's just not enough anymore to have a plan for when something goes wrong by accident. Now we have to have a documented, tested, and verified plan to proactively defend against anyone who would intentionally cause harm or commit fraud. It's a whole new ballgame.
And this brings us right back to the central question. As you look at your own operation, your facility, your people, your entire supply chain, I want you to ask yourself, where is our biggest risk? Are we more vulnerable to a malicious attack coming from the outside or a fraudulent supplier working from the inside? Answering that question, well, that's the first real step on the path to true food security.